This podcast is produced by Nelligan Law.
Welcome to All Worked Up. I'm Jill.
I'm Dana. And Jill, what's got you all worked up today?
We're very worked up today. We have a very exciting episode today. We are worked up about mediations, which is a process that we go through very often in employment law. And we're so lucky to have one of Ottawa's best employment mediators here with us today to talk about mediations. John Westdal, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. I've really enjoyed the episode, so it's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
We're happy to have you. I got to tell you, so I didn't say this before deliberately, but when John was an employment lawyer, before switching over to being a mediator, he was one of the first experiences I had with opposing counsel on a file, and I was junioring Janice, and she called you about the file, and when you answered the phone, you said, "Janice, always a pleasure." And that was my first introduction to the Ottawa bar, and I thought it was so nice that's the other response that you get from opposing counsel on what can be difficult files.
That's good to hear. I wish I could say I remembered that. I probably used that line with everyone I talked to, but it was also sincere at the time.
Yeah.
It was sincere at the time, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it made a bigger impact on me thinking like, oh my God, here's this call to another counsel.
And we're always like afraid that lawyers are going to be really scary because there's this like idea of what the law, like lawyers and law firms are going to be like. And then certainly when we joined the employment bar in Ottawa, everybody's pretty lovely.
I think that we're really blessed to be able to practice with such a great group of people.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So mediation's really important because it's often one of the first steps that either before a file starts or after, it's one of the first steps that we take and one of the first real opportunities to resolve a matter outside of like the demand letter process or get to a resolution. So as you said, it's something we spend a lot of time doing.
Yeah.
Why did you make the jump? Why did you choose to become a mediator?
Yeah. So after 20 plus years of practice, I did make that change. But it was because, I think like you, I saw the importance of mediation and really the value of mediation. And I wanted to be part of that process. Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity for the parties to problem solve relatively early on in the litigation process. And it can be done in a cost-effective manner. And I think you can achieve outcomes that can at times provide more satisfaction in closure than what a court might be able to fashion, even when you win. And God forbid, if you don't win, it can be a terrible outcome. So I just always viewed that process as so fundamental to the system that we're in, and to the extent that I could play a role in it and assist the parties get that closure that I think is so valued to them, then it was that's what motivated me to make the change.
It is an incredible experience, again, like going back to just this stereotype of lawyers or what it's like to be a lawyer, what it's like to go through litigation. You think you're going to go all the way to court. You think you're going to have your day in court. And then often things do resolve in mediations, but yeah, like you said, so much more can be done. People can have a chance to really speak their minds. The mediators are such an important part of that because they are not just mediating, but they're listening a lot of times, and they're, giving that sort of day in court to employees who often feel maybe they've been hurt or they have been misheard, and they just get that chance to speak to a third party and have them sort of validate some of their feelings and then talk through, everything with them. So maybe you can tell us if we're speaking to somebody who might be preparing for their first mediation, maybe they've never done a mediation before. What advice would you give to an employee who's never been part of something like this?
I think first, have them understand the mediation process. And so what can they expect coming into a mediation? If you think it's going to be 20 minutes to an hour, no, that's not happening. Right. I think we all know that. So usually either a half day or a full day is booked. An individual can expect, some obviously prep time with their counsel, but if we want to focus just on either the half day or the full day, Initially coming in, they would be in a room with their counsel and they'd be talking to them and getting comfortable. And I would have the opposing counsel and their client in a separate room. I would come in and I would introduce myself and get comfortable with them. And then we would ask, are you wanting to get together with the other side and have what we call a joint session? Sometimes those decisions will be made in advance, and so I'll know the answer in advance. But if a party has said, well, I'll think about it on the day, then we have that discussion. And are you comfortable getting together with the other side and talking these issues through with them present? I dare say that most mediations in the employment context, that doesn't occur.
Was going to ask about that. I had a mediator recently. I was not expecting it. Just say, okay, everyone, opening statements.
Yeah.
And I almost like felt, oh my God, I told my client, oh, you won't have to do one, don't worry. And this mediator wasn't typically in employment. He did like more commercial. And so we were totally taken off guard. It was fine. But do you recommend doing opening?
Yeah.
When would you recommend?
I mean, typically I'm going to say, 90 to 95% you don't do joint sessions in the employment context. That might be quite different outside of this field, and maybe in other fields they do. It's in large part because I don't think it actually advances the process. If employment disputes are often very, relational, and it is hard to get, and those relations obviously very strained. It is hard to get the parties in a room without emotions being very heightened. Conjuring up, revisiting things that led to the end of the employment relationship, because that's often what we're dealing with. And I don't think it creates the right mindset for achieving a resolution. In a joint session, counsel often will do an opening statement. Inevitably, they're advocating on behalf of their clients. They're wanting to put on a show for their clients. They're speaking maybe a little bit about the law, certainly about the facts that are in their favor. What does that do? On the other side, the hair on the back of the neck goes up. The counsel feels they need to respond. The client is feeling, well, that's not what happened. I have a completely different perspective on it. So they get amped up. At the end of maybe half an hour together, they're not in a position to think pragmatically, objectively, reasonably about achieving, like getting closure, problem solving, achieving a resolution.
They're probably going back to thinking, oh, I should have said this.
Or picked up this point.
Yeah, did you hear the lawyer say that?
And what I've had with, so I feel like there's been a shift over time, and maybe I'm wrong, but in the early days of my practice, we did seem to do more joint sessions. Maybe it's just as I don't know. I feel like I do them a lot less now, and there was one that I did where opposing counsel on for the employer, which was a fairly big company, said, fine, if you want to do a joint session, we'll do a joint session. And it was a very emotional one. My person needed to be heard. They spoke, they said their piece, and opposing counsel said, okay, thank you. And that was it. Like he was like, I'm going to tell my client. And you can do that sometimes with a big institutional client and where it's not personal, where the person there has nothing, like it's an HR person who is not involved at all and is just kind of like stands back and fine, I'll take it, but I don't care.
I mean, did I agree when I was practicing when mediations became mandatory in Ottawa. And I remember the initial mediations, you would always have a joint session. I even remember the first mediator we used had like a flip chart that talked about how our interests were going to intersect. And we were all quite excited about the process. And if anyone did that now, you would just be, this is like, we're in a Twilight Zone.
I think you need to bring that back, John. I would love for you to just punk the next.
But I will say that
a Venn diagram. Here.
But I think, Dana, there is, there are occasions where it can be valuable. And I think, the scenario that I outlined where a lawyer is advocating on behalf of their client, I don't think that where they're basically repeating what's in the materials already, which I have read, that's not helpful. But there are scenarios where someone does feel they need to be heard, and not just heard by me, because certainly when I'm in the room with a party, I mean, I'm listening as much as I can, and I want them to speak to me. And it can be a very cathartic experience for them, so that's great. But it's also really valuable for me because I get a better understanding of what's important to them. I get a better sort of sense of where their interests are. So it's a really valuable process. I think most of the time, that process can achieve what it needs to achieve in a private session just with me, but sometimes the other side needs to hear it. And if that's the case, I will orchestrate an opportunity for the parties to get together. But it's really important that the other side, accept that this is, someone speaking. And again, not to diminish what they're saying, but to not necessarily react in an aggressive manner and recognize if they do, that this isn't going to advance the process. And I assume that when everyone comes into a mediation, that they are going to make a good faith effort to try to resolve the case. They would like to resolve the case. And if that's if that truly is what they're trying to achieve, then let's take steps along the way to achieve it.
Right.
And an aggressive response back to someone that felt that they needed to say something, again, it's not necessarily the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So maybe getting back on track of what they can expect. We've kind of covered the joint session.
Yes, we have.
But if we don't do a joint session, then typically what happens is I will definitely spend time with the parties trying to better understand the case. And of course, I'll have read the materials in advance, but what you see in writing doesn't always cover everything. And it also doesn't often reveal the emotions behind the issues.
Right.
And so by me speaking to them and really focusing on the experiences that they lived through, both from the employer and the employee's side, that's really helping me. It allows us to clarify facts, which at times can be very relevant to then the parties making offers. I mean, always facts are relevant, but at times you go into a mediation where there's some important things that aren't known. An employer will often want to know, what is the employee doing right now? If they've been dismissed, have they found work? If they have, what are they earning? Sometimes that's not in the brief. So that needs to be addressed before an employer is comfortable even advancing an offer in the first place.
Sure. Right.
So we sort through some of the facts that need to be clarified for the parties to make an informed decision about, offers to settle or trying to get it resolved. Once that occurs, we then move to, okay, how do we solve this problem? What does it look like? There's almost always a money component.
Yes.
Money is as
Money
much
is
as we
money
say,
talk,
as much as we say, it's not about the money.
It's always about the money.
We know it's about the
always
money.
about the
We
money.
know it's about the money. I try to get the parties to think about, yes, money's important, but really what is more important in many ways are the things you haven't necessarily considered. What is the reputational impact? What's the value of closure? And when we think about money, we can, money is addressing an interest that one has for a degree of financial security. But I think the parties can get really hung up on, money, so X amount to me represents this and a little bit less somehow feels like a failure, when both of those numbers, if we step back from it, both of those numbers might provide a degree of financial security in order to allow you to transition to the next stage of your career. But we have that focus on the money, and that can sometimes be a little bit of a barrier to getting resolution. But there are things other than money. There are, if I just think of some very practical things, if you have an individual with a defined benefit pension plan who's getting near retirement, could we have a situation where they remain an employee on a leave of absence while their pensionable service continues? Could we provide some transitional support in the form of outplacement that allows them to perhaps, increase the probability of getting a new job? Letters of reference get raised. I don't think they're super valuable these days, but sometimes that's an important piece.
I think they're valuable if they are sincere. If they're actually saying good things about, it was just, a business decision that we had to cut this person and we're arguing over how many months they get, but here's the good things that we can say about them, and we'll say those good things on a call, without being like, I'm stuck to the script of the letter.
No, but a lot of companies have those tombstone letters. Just he was here for 25 years. This was his job.
They're so worried about liability on that when it's been a good employee, not someone who they they would be giving a false reference for. But anyway, I
Yeah,
interrupted.
I
I'm
agree.
sorry.
They're not critical. For
Yeah.
some people, they can be important.
Yeah.
Maybe a little old school. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Oh,
But,
yeah, I think so,
I just wanted to make the point. It's not always about the money.
I say
Yeah.
find someone else you can ask for a reference at the company.
Continuing with that process, you're going to have some offers back and forth. There, someone should come into it without the expectation that their first offer is going to be accepted.
Right.
Yeah.
And who do you normally push to make the first offer? Or do you sort of look to see who's done the last?
Yeah, I mean, in advance, I'll be asking counsel, what is the status of the settlement discussions? And if there's an offer outstanding, because one side has made an offer and they haven't received a response, I would turn to the party that should be responding to say, hey, we're waiting for a response. If no offers have been made, I mean, the default is usually you look to the person that started the action, started the claim. So that's often the plaintiff, the dismissed employee. And most counsel would understand that they would be the ones expected to make the first offer. But one of the things is, as a mediator, I actually have no power. I mean, I might sit there, present myself as a very authoritative and formal individual, and I'll often be in a suit and tie. And really boiled down, I have no power at all. Yeah.
People are confused about that a lot because they
I think that's
expect
important.
not like that. Yeah, clients think this is my day in court, as you were saying before, and I'm gonna, get a sense of the strength of my case and that kind of thing. We try to tell them the mediator's there to see if they can get to a resolution. But how much of your opinion do you give on the strength of a case?
Well, it depends, and it varies as the day progresses.
Yeah.
Right. I bet. I'm sure it does.
Yeah, I talk about I have no power. I mean, at the end of the day, I am sort of, I say facetiously a circus master to some extent in terms of trying to keep people corralled and in the right place. But I think more importantly, initially a facilitator, and I have those discussions, and I try to get people in the right mindset to be discussing resolutions. And initially, the approach is facilitative. I mean, if the parties can get to a resolution without me weighing in and sort of leaning on them and, offering an opinion, then wonderful. That's great.
Yeah.
And at first, I need to establish a degree of trust and rapport. And so I can't come into, a room and right at the outset give my opinion. And, if the opinion isn't necessarily in accordance with the expectations of a party, then I think I've lost them right at the beginning. But, if offers are being exchanged and we're really far apart and, time is ticking and we're not making any progress, I think it's time to start to maybe have a bit of a dose of reality with people, right? And I have practiced. I did practice for over 2 decades. I do only labor and employment mediation. So I do feel I'm pretty knowledgeable about the subjects that are and issues that are often in dispute. And, I can't help but form opinions. And as the day goes on, I also can't help but at times express an opinion. Now, I'm very careful because I don't know how the evidence is going to play out in court.
Sure,
right?
nobody
does. Yeah, no one does. And I think it's important for clients to understand that. I mean, they might have a very firm view about what occurred, but
Never,
yes. But their view isn't what rules the day. It's what a judge, what he or she deems the facts to be. And your view might not be the one that is ultimately held by a decision maker.
Right.
So I don't have the power there, but I also recognize that I think I do have some powers of persuasion. And I'm generally a very reasonable person. At least, of course, that's my self-image. Or maybe others have a very different
Maybe the judge
view.
would find differently.
Yes, maybe someone else would find differently. But
We agree. Very reasonable.
Very reasonable.
I do find that if we're not making progress, it's inevitable that I will start to weigh in on things. And just, obviously, I'd love cases to settle. If we can achieve settlement, that's what the parties are there for.
Yeah.
That's great. That's my objective.
Yeah.
I don't have skin in the game in terms of where it settles. I mean, it's not for me to decide. And truly, I am not deciding. I'm not a judge. People need to understand that. But I just, if we're going to make progress, and I feel that we're not, parties, I want to ensure that they are making an informed decision about the offers they're advancing. And I think more importantly, as we get near the end of the day, the offers that they're rejecting.
Right.
So if you see an offer on the table and it's presented either as a close to final offer or a final offer, and the other side, whether it's the employer or the employee, is saying no, or I'm getting the sense that they're not buying into it, I really want to make sure that they have properly understood the case. And when I say the case, that's a bit too narrow. I want to make sure they've properly understood not only their case, but what the alternatives are.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Like-
what's so important.
Because you might feel that this doesn't reflect what my entitlements are. Why should I take a discount? I'm confident that my version of the facts will be accepted by a decision maker, you know?
Yeah.
Why this isn't representing what my expectations are?
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. Now, let's look at, if you do reject that offer, what the alternative is. So you have no resolution today, and then you're either going to have to, get all the documents ready to exchange affidavits of documents if you haven't done so already. You're going to then need to sit down and basically be cross-examined by a lawyer on the other side about a time that you probably didn't find very fun in your life. And it's not really going to be fun to have a lawyer asking you questions under oath about that.
Yeah.
That's probably going to happen 3 to 6 months after the mediation.
Right.
If you don't get a resolution there, then you're going to have to, assuming that there aren't any other interlocutory matters that you've got to deal with through motions, then you're going to sit down in front of a pretrial judge, maybe 9 months later.
lucky right
if
now.
You're lucky.
The pretrial scheduled for, I think, December
And-
2024.
Yeah, that takes
Yeah.
time and effort
Yeah.
and work, and you don't necessarily get a resolution there, and then you get in line for a trial that might be a year and a half from now. So that alternative is not pleasant. And the other thing is, and I sometimes do have to pull this out of the back pocket, and I'm not being disingenuous when I do, I would say to people, and a year and a half from now, you get in front of a judge, and congratulations, you win. Wonderful. So what does that mean? You get X amount of notice, and that X amount is greater than the 2 months less than X amount that they offer you at mediation. So
Right.
congratulations.
Yeah.
But our courts don't compensate you 100 cents on the dollar on legal
Not.
fees. So you're automatically losing something. Then ask yourself, if fortune smiles upon you and you happen to get a job a few months after the mediation, you might be netting less than what's being offered now.
Yeah.
Because the judge says, congratulations, you get 10 months. And then they turn to you and they say, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Jones, when did you find work? And what if Miss Jones said, well, actually, I found work 6 months later? They say, well, congratulations, you found new work. I'm delighted. And so instead of offering you 10, we're only going to give you 6 because the 6 happen to be at the same salary with benefits and pension. So they don't actually get 10. They get 6.
Yeah.
And if 6 is on the table at mediation and you haven't had to go through another year and a half without closure and the spending of legal fees, and that is in a good case scenario.
That is.
What happens if your version of events is not accepted and you lose? So you have to pay your own counsel and then take the deep breath.
Yeah.
You might have to pay, not just might, you almost certainly are going to have to pay a portion of the other side's legal fees.
Yeah.
So that's not an ideal situation for most people. And so I mean, I'm not trying to conjure up this nightmare scenario. Maybe we should have done this on your Halloween episode, which I quite enjoyed. But I will say that I want to ensure that the parties understand that, that is the pathway that they're going down in the absence of a resolution on the day of the mediation.
Yeah.
Or, if it doesn't resolve on the day of mediation, I mean, it's the alternative to a resolution at some point in the litigation process.
Yeah.
And that can often be quite effective, having those types of discussions. But, counsel parties that are well prepared because they've had these discussions in advance, they know that already, and I don't need to talk to them about that. And in that case, I've had scenarios where, counsel or clients have said to me, John, we understand that there's risk. We've done a risk assessment. We know the costs. We know the time frame for proceeding through the court process. And I think, well, wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't need to talk to you about it. You know the alternative. Yeah. And if you choose to reject, reject an offer to settle, I'm confident that you are making an informed decision that's right for you at this time. Completely respect that. We have no deal. I mean, no problem.
Yeah.
Not every case settles.
Yeah.
Obviously, I try to work towards that, but I don't measure the success of the mediation necessarily by whether the matter resolves, because sometimes you can't get a resolution.
Yeah.
And it's not a failure on the system. It's not a failure on the process. It's not a lack of consideration by the parties. It's just that, they understand the alternatives. People have different risk tolerances. People have different, they value closure in different ways, and they've made informed decisions about what their position should be. And unfortunately, those positions don't intersect, so we don't have a resolution. So if we think about how that day, I'm going to circle back to the process question, we exchange offers. If we get a deal, the parties can expect that minutes of settlement might be signed on the day. If not, they would follow either, later that day or the next day. And if we don't have a resolution, it's no deal. I would complete a form that I filed with the court indicating no deal. I don't indicate anything else in that form. Everything, by the way, discussed during the day is without prejudice and confidence. And the parties move forward and they continue, I guess, they continue to fight, so to speak.
Yeah, to the next stage. And, like you said, I've always told clients there's no such thing as a failed mediation, whether there's a settlement at the end of the day or not. You've always, you can always gain something after the fact. But do you, after we've sort of said, okay, there's no deal, goodbye, John, thank you very much. Do you see the parties ever again? I mean, will you reach out? Is there the potential to have sort of a...
There's always
the dark side.
There's always, sorry, Jill, there's always potential.
Okay, Janice gets
sorry. There's always potential, and there are certainly times when the parties are really close. We didn't get a deal, but in the days that follow, I will reach out and I might make a suggestion or a proposal, and at times a good night's sleep, a sober second thought can cause one to revisit their position. So that does occur. But it's usually in the minority of cases. This isn't always happening.
Absolutely.
But, periodically I'll get the sense that, no, we're really close, and just one more little discussion. At times, if you're an individual plaintiff who's been let go, maybe a discussion with a spouse or trusted advisor, family member who wasn't there on the day can help. For an employer, going back, having other, key stakeholders at the boardroom table to revisit the matter, that can help too. So
yeah,
I might have had
at times it helps.
A limited ceiling that they could go to, and they go back and get that little bit more.
Exactly. Like you have to go back, you have to say, okay, it didn't settle. Now we have to start prepping for discoveries. Okay, now I'm going to
another
need
10,000.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like maybe you can get a little bit more. Can you talk to us about some of the creative ways that mediators can get parties to make a settlement through things like a blind... What do we call them?
Yeah.
Double blind.
Double blind.
Well, we call it
it's some fun stuff you guys do.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to call them tricks, because tricks implies that there's a level of deception that's going on, a sleight of hand, and that's never the case. But
tools.
That's right, tools.
In your
tools
tool
in the toolbox. Mediators' proposals can be very effective, and so let's take our minds back to we're at the end of the mediation, and the parties have made what they may have called final offers, or lines have been drawn in the sand. But let's remember, sand isn't concrete. Sand, is malleable to some extent. But we're there. We're at the end of the day, and we just there's a gap, but no one wants to make that next step. Instead of calling an end to proceedings and saying, well, no deal, I guess we're done. We'll go home.
Goodbye.
It's getting late. Tick-tock. I will often say, could we just have one last chance at this? And a mediator's proposal is one where the mediator advances terms of settlement that can be accepted or rejected without change. This isn't a negotiation anymore. I mean, I'm advancing a settlement, accepted or rejected, but the beauty of that is it's done, your acceptance or rejection is done without the other side initially knowing what you're doing, like whether you will accept or reject.
Right.
If I hear from both parties confidentially, we're prepared to accept, wonderful. We had lines in the sand. Guess what? We got a deal.
Yeah.
To acceptance. Great. We have a deal. If one side says, nope, can't do it, that sand actually is not moving, or that line's not moving, then immediately it's off, and the party that said no deal will not know whether the other side accepted or rejected. So in that sense, the other side, even though they may have accepted, has not had their cards seen. They haven't shown their hand. It's very effective because the offer or the terms of settlement, like they're coming from me. And sometimes there is a bit of a psychological kind of barrier at the end where I don't feel I want to accept what they're offering. Like I'm accepting what they're saying. No, they should accept what I'm saying.
I want to have the last word. There is something there.
I'm right, accept what I'm saying. I don't want to concede and accept what they're saying. And further, what you're saying is just a little too much. I can't do it. If it comes from me, and by the way, this isn't like we always just split it in the middle. When I see the two parties, I mean, if a party's at 20 and the other's at 10, it doesn't mean that my proposal is at 15. I mean, I can't ignore facts. I can't ignore law. I have to recognize and factor in how I think it might play out if the matter proceeded. But a really important thing is I'm also considering, like what I've heard in the day, where do I think I can get the party to stretch to? Is there truly rigidity in one room that I just know that they won't go beyond a certain amount, and I think they might be able to stretch this amount, the other might be able to stretch a touch more. It doesn't mean I'm taking sides. It just means I'm trying to fashion a deal that I believe, first and foremost, is fair and reasonable for the parties, but one that I think is the best deal that can be achieved on the day. It's the best deal you're going to get today. And I'm really hoping I can strike that right balance, but it isn't always in the middle. And again, when it's not in the middle, it's not that I'm taking sides, but when I do that, I dare say I think it's a wonderful tool. It's a very effective tool because it does often result in settlements, but not always. I mean, I can get a no. But sometimes I can get two yeses.
And you get those
and I have to say, with the twinkle in the eye, when I get the yes, it's like, or when I get the yes, it's like, oh, this is great.
Isn't that amazing?
And it's very, I will say, I mean, I'm such a big believer in mediations, and even when I was counsel, I always put a lot of time and effort into it. And as a mediator, I just love it when there is a deal. And it can be so meaningful for clients who have really stressed. I mean, having it, because their employment, I mean, typically it's when an employment relationship ends. So that's obviously a very stressful event in an individual's life, and it can be stressful for employers too. Going through the court process is inherently stressful for someone. I mean, I found as counsel, I would get stressed, going through some of these things. And
take it on heavily, the case.
If I'm stressed as counsel, how
about it.
does the client feel? I can only imagine how stressed they are. And they're worried about, the cost of all of this and what happens if my version of events isn't accepted by a trial judge. And so to get closure in mediation, hopefully in a cost-effective manner early on, it's a huge relief. You see it in their face. There's a weight off the shoulders, a lightness in the step. And again, I'm careful to say for both employees and employers, HR professionals, they don't like to fight. They might be called as a witness or someone's boss or manager. They're nervous about the process. I think there's a misconception that for employers, they're a nameless, faceless corporation that doesn't matter. It's not their money. It's shareholder money. Who cares? It's a misconception. Right. Employers find litigation stressful as well. And for both sides, to get clear, there's a lightness. People will often feign, I accepted less than I wanted. I can see through you pretty clearly. I know you're relieved. So,
more. Like you've got these clients and then they come to a number that they're not happy with. That's not what I wanted. I wanted my 24 months. But when they are signing, you have that kind of last phone call with them. They are so relieved. They are so happy. They're usually, okay, I'm going to go have a glass of wine. I'm going to,
that's what I tell people. I always say you're probably going to have buyer's remorse initially, But even if it's like, but it's probably not like you have to sit with it for a bit. People always think afterwards, oh, I settled for too little, or oh, I paid too much. But sit with it and think about what you don't have to go through.
So happy to be done.
And then I also tell them, what's your vice? Is it wine? Is it a piece of cake? Is it whatever? Have some ready for the night of the mediation because you're going to be exhausted.
Now
And really important though, after the mediation.
After the mediation.
After the mediation.
Only when it's all done. If you're going to be signing that day. If you're going to be signing the next day, maybe wait. But like, go at home.
After the mediation.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about our clients going home. Ever since COVID, we've been doing virtual mediation. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about virtual mediations and what that looks like now. Because
the world pivoted in so many ways in March of 2020, and mediators and counsel and clients had to get up to speed on, the use of technology and, through Zoom or Teams or other platforms. Mediations were 100% virtual after that date. And over time, we saw they're remarkably effective. And many people ask, well, are the settlement rates the same versus in person? And the answer back, and not just in my experience, but with colleagues who we've all had extensive discussions, and they agree that the settlement rates are largely the same, which is wonderful.
Interesting.
And the process is largely the same in that we create breakout rooms just like we do in person. You're only with counsel, you're not seeing the other side. I come into that room. If we want to do a joint session, we get back in the main, or we get into the main room. Otherwise, you return on your own accord back into the breakout room. So the process is remarkably similar. There, of course, are some important differences. I mean, I'm in my office, I'm staring at a screen, as are others. Initially, I had some unfortunate experiences where people are trying to do it on their phone and they're moving around and they're static and their internet isn't great. We've kind of worked through most of that stuff. Initially, we had all these great security concerns. Am I going to get Zoom bombed? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
Like everybody wants to sit in on your mediation.
Yeah,
right?
well, that's right. These are about,
Nobody cares.
No one, it's very important, but the outside world, no one cares. I've never been Zoom bombed. Sometimes I feel, well, it can be interesting if we were, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So, process similar, outcome similar. I spoke recently at an event and I said I anticipate that moving forward, most of the time they will be virtual. And I mean, let's look at some of the real pros. When there's travel involved, like if you can avoid the travel, wonderful. If people are coming in from Toronto, or perhaps they've moved, or you're doing a mediation where parties are just in different cities, to avoid the travel, so that's time, cost, inconvenience. If we can avoid that, wonderful. Something that maybe isn't talked about, but I think counsel appreciates, downtime is easier to deal with virtually.
Oh my gosh.
So in a mediation, in a mediation, you have to warn your clients there's a lot of downtime because I might spend half an hour in the other room. So what does counsel have to do? Counsel is making small talk with their client. The first half an hour, fine. The third half an hour, you've covered the kids, you've covered what you're doing for the holidays, you've covered the weather. What are you talking about now? Virtually, it's like, let's just take a break. Counsel can attend perhaps to some other things. Not that they disconnect, but it's, I think that becomes a little easier.
You can stop the clock at times if you have.
And
you're
it's
not talking to them, I'm not billing you.
Cost effective.
Yes.
So there are absolutely some pros. I did a in-person mediation recently.
And how did it go?
It settled. It's so wonderful.
Good. Okay.
I believe that.
Not that that's how you judge the success.
No, we don't judge success
sorry.
by settlement. I do believe it would have settled had we done it virtually.
Okay.
But I have to say, at the end of the session and even during the session, I just felt more energized.
Okay.
I felt it was a more satisfactory experience doing it in person. And it surprised me.
Interesting.
Because I thought...
You just said recently at a conference, you said
I said
never
recently
again.
at a conference, it's going to remain virtual. No. Like,
you've heard it here, folks.
I don't decide. But I don't decide.
No, of course not.
Like, counsel decides. If they say they want to do it virtually, fine. If they say they want to do it in person, fine. But I kind of in the back of my mind thought, well, I'd prefer to do it virtually. And when I think about it, like, I don't want to schlep to Toronto again and take the Porter flight and land in the city and get my flight canceled maybe and then stay in a hotel and go to downtown and... my gosh, I don't look forward to that. And so I sort of thought I've got a bias towards virtual. And then, my gosh, it was in person and I saw people.
Yeah, felt
I
good.
mean, I'm looking at you guys in
Yeah.
person.
Does
We're not
feel-
virtual.
Doesn't it
Yeah.
feel nice?
And I was energized.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
I was still exhausted at the end,
Yes.
but I
Yes.
still felt there was something about it where I just felt it was a little bit more satisfactory as an overall process.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to
Oh, it's
change
so-
my view a
it's
little
been
bit. But again, it's
so
not for me to
interesting.
decide. But it's not for me to decide.
Yeah.
But I was just surprised
Yeah.
at the differences.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show, at its core, we're social creatures.
We are. That's
And it really allows us to kind of segue into employment disputes are about, strained, broken relationships.
Mhm.
And so I just think there's a greater connection in doing it in person. But somewhat ironically, while I now talk about the pros of in person, I actually don't think it changes the outcomes.
the overall outcome.
The overall outcome. And there are scenarios where, no, we don't want to. I mean, we talk about convenience, but, there are scenarios where the relationship, like let's say there's allegations of sexual impropriety. Someone is so concerned about being anywhere in close physical proximity. I will, of course, take every precaution to ensure that they never connect.
Right.
But an individual might feel just having them present in the building, let alone the
Absolutely.
same floor, let alone a wall away.
What if you see them in the parking
the
garage on
elevator?
the way?
Yeah,
like,
it's
even
so
though you can say,
overwhelming.
they've gone, they've
Yeah.
left, but on the
You
way
say,
up.
oh, I
or
saw
just-
them in Starbucks. I've
Yeah.
had that before.
Yeah.
Oh, like I just
In that
saw them.
case-
I didn't think
Yeah.
I'd see them. Yeah.
Virtual is for you.
Virtual.
But
Yeah.
again, not for me to decide.
Yeah.
Council will know that in advance,
Right.
and they'll make the. So what I think is wonderful is that the pandemic, for all of the horrors that it brought upon us, and for all the changes, it did introduce us to a different way of doing things. That in some, it's caused an acceleration of this, and it's allowed us to consider an alternate format that in some cases is essential, and in other cases is just more convenient and perhaps better.
Yeah.
But I don't want to give up the in-person. particularly
Yeah,
given my
that's
recent
interesting.
experience.
Yeah.
I thought when we switched over, I thought this isn't going to work. People are not going to
Yeah.
settle because they don't have that same pressure of I'm here, I'm in the office, I've flown in from Toronto. And sometimes you get into that boardroom and you are there all day, like you said, and you're sitting with your counsel and you can get antsy and it starts to put that pressure on you to like, I kind of want a settlement to get me out of this room.
Yeah, just the opportunity
Yeah.
cost
Right?
of being there. Like it's
Yeah.
so high. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, fine. I'm going to put some money on the table so
Because
I
I
don't
just-
have to
Yeah.
do
wanna
this
come
again. And I
back.
got to get out of here.
Yeah, and I used to always make sure. So whenever there was a mediation, so typically if we were representing the employees, we would hold the mediation at our office, and I would always make sure that there were cookies or muffins or something in the rooms, keep the blood sugar up. And I don't know who told me that this was like a big Toronto trick or whatever, was to never have food in the room.
Sure.
Don't put water in
Yeah.
there. Like you're going to starve them out or
Yeah.
something like that. But I just felt that
Or
if
make
you're
them
at-
angry.
or make them
That's
hangry.
a-
That's what I always thought. You're just
Yeah.
gonna make people hangry.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, but if you go home, if people are in their homes and they've got their slippers on and they've got their snacks,
Yeah.
they're gonna be like, I don't really care.
Yeah, they got
I'm not
Netflix
gonna-
on. in
I've got my
between, yeah.
Netflix, but it didn't happen like
Yeah.
that
From
the way I
my-
thought it would.
Yeah, from the mediator's perspective, I don't think hangry is actually a good mindset. For
No, that's what I was
resolution.
thinking. That's the
That's
bad
what-
part.
that's
I
what we
get
meant,
that
yeah.
they want to get out of there.
That's
Yeah.
what I
but
never
just-
understood.
Yeah,
I never understood
to
that.
me, that just doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not great. It's
Yeah.
not
No,
great.
no. So it's been interesting. We've like had some really successful mediations, and there's got to be like a survey or something. Maybe we can conduct on
In terms of
client satisfaction. I'd
yeah.
love to. I mean, obviously, there's no way to truly know would this have settled if we were in person, but I know just a client. It's hard. It's hard because clients have usually have only done it once.
Yeah.
So they can't say which one they've preferred. But
Well, certainly,
very
though, getting back
curious.
to my earlier point, I mean, on objective measures, I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
the settlement rates are about the same.
Mm-hmm.
But it's for a point you raised, Jill, that in terms of someone's, let's say, you might settle it, but their overall satisfaction, do they feel that they had that they were heard,
yeah,
that their position was considered, that there was meaningful engagement and dialogue? Their satisfaction rates might not be the same, and I think that is important. I mean, settlement, first and foremost, you got the problem solved. Like, that's what we're trying to achieve, so that's great. But I think there's other sort of, softer measures that are important, and you might not get the same levels, the same achievement sort of in a virtual.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have a question I got to ask John.
Okay. Go ahead.
It's kind of pivoting, but you said something about you might be in the other room. You might be in the other room for a half an hour. And I got to know, like, what are you talking to the employer about? Because sometimes
I can't tell you.
I know he can't tell me, but like, you just sit there and you go, what is he talking? What are they saying? What are they talking about in there?
I'm often very apologetic, and I warn people, like, when I leave the room, I say, and actually you hear this from me many times, and I sound like a broken record, but like, I'd like to be 5 minutes. I'm probably going to be half an hour.
Yeah.
And it's a bit surprising as to why, but let's recognize when I go into the other room. So first of all, everyone wants to be heard. So I'm doing a lot of listening.
Right.
Because people, the first thing that they want to, they want to get a sense of me, but then they want to tell me their story. So I have to allow them to talk to me. And it's not me being patronizing or pandering to them. It's really helpful for the process. They need to get it off their shoulders, but I need to hear it. Because the more I hear, the better understanding I have about what's important to them. So there's that's going on. Right. Then there's okay, well, let's talk about these issues that are in dispute, because I then need to center them. You might feel this way. These are all important things to you. They're not necessarily important to a decision maker.
Right.
And we just need to center the conversation. So that's what's happening. And so then I'm getting them to talk about some of the things that are relevant to, to a legal dispute. That's what we're in. Let's not ignore that fact.
Yeah.
I will also, and this is, again, not being deceptive, but it is a tool. I don't want to go in and say, you've got the best case possible. Oh my gosh, I'd love to be in your shoes. This is great.
Yeah.
Because what does that do? It means that they're going, well, I'm not going to compromise at all. Right. Well, you're not going to get a resolution if you don't compromise. And yet I can't walk into the room and go, oh, I'd be darn scared.
Shaking in my boots.
And if you lose, you're going to owe them, $20,000, $30,000 in costs. And I don't believe a single word you said. And your narrative is just so outlandish that actually I think you're a fool.
You don't?
So
After you read one of my briefs?
But what I can do is listen, empathize, but also just say that, well, there are certain scenarios in which you might not get 24 months that you so, strongly believe that that's what you're entitled to.
Right.
So I might start to steer the discussion towards areas where they might have a degree of vulnerability. And I don't say that you're vulnerable in that regard, and there's nothing improper about that. It's, again, part of my objective to have someone make an informed decision. And for someone to make an informed decision at the end of the day about accepting or rejecting an offer, they need to have considered the downside risk. They need to have considered areas of their case where they might not be as strong as they think they are. So early on, I'm steering the conversation in that direction, not necessarily sort of arguing with them. And indeed, I never argue with clients or with the parties. But so you're having those types of discussions. And boy, oh boy, it takes a long time.
It does.
And so there's a lot of waiting around. And I'm really sorry, but it's part of the process. And what I would also say is, while you think I've spent a lot of time in that room, think back to how much time did I spend in your room? And then how much time are we spending right now? Like you need the time, like your clients need the time in the same way the other clients need the time.
I think
it takes time.
It's so important for clients or our clients to hear that. And we're hopeful that people that are first time, their first time mediation process are going to listen to this podcast and just get an idea that you're taking your time. But
there is taking time, but there is, at least for me, there is no wasted time. And I am already a sort of a frenetic. I've got anxious energy and I hate it when I'm just kind of sitting there waiting. Where I'm not involved in the process. But I do recognize that when you're in separate rooms and I'm with someone and we're talking, the other side's waiting. And we have to be respectful of that. But it occurs. It's unfortunate, but it's a necessary part of the process.
Totally. Yeah. John, I think we could keep you here all day.
I feel
and as you can see, I could talk all day. I could talk all day. Yeah.
We're gonna bring you back.
I know this is so helpful. I think we're going to be sending this podcast out to everybody who's about to have a mediation because
it's been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed the show. And it's always, as you can see, I could talk about mediations for a long, long time. And
so can we.
Yeah.
We love them.
Yeah. No, thank you for being here. And we really enjoyed it. Our first guest.
Our first guest. So thank you guys so much for listening, and make sure
To like,
share, follow, all
subscribe.
the things. And thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.